Morning, everyone. Does the state have an additional witness?
Your Honor, the state of Minnesota rests.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, are you ready to proceed? Call your first witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Scott Creighton.
Your Honor, prior to the testimony, we request the cautionary.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat. I have to delay just a little bit. Having trouble getting the computer to work, and there's something I have to read the jury, but you can be seated. All right. Hold on, let me try and. My apologies. Hold on. All right, let's have you give your first, middle, and last name and spell each of your names.
My name is Scott Robbie Creighton, C-R-E-I-G-H-T-O-N.
Members of the jury, you are about to hear evidence of an occurrence involving George Floyd on May 6th, 2019. This evidence is being admitted solely for the limited purpose of showing what effects the ingestion of opioids may or may not have had on the physical well-being of George Floyd. This evidence is not to be used as evidence of the character of George Floyd. Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Creighton, by whom are you currently employed?
Your Honor, is there any way that we can, I could hear it a little louder? Could it be a little louder? I'm having difficulty hearing. Sorry about that, sir.
No problem,
I
sir.
just want to make sure I hear all the questions.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. By whom are you currently employed?
Right now, I'm currently retired. I'm not employed by anybody.
Prior to your retirement, by whom were you employed?
The City of Minneapolis Police Department,
And how long did you work for the City of Minneapolis Police Department?
28 years.
Can you describe for the jury generally the various roles that you had for the Minneapolis Police Department?
Yes, I will. I started in 1993. I started on the street working as a 911 responder. I did 6 years as a 911 responder, and then I transferred over to public housing for approximately 9 months as public housing officer. And then from there, I went to the 4th Precinct and became a community response team member, involved as a street-level narcotics investigator. I did that for 22 years.
All right. Now, were you on duty on May 6th of 2019?
Yes, I was.
If you had an opportunity to review various police reports and body-worn cameras from an incident on that date.
Yes, I have.
On that date at approximately 4 or just before 5 o'clock p.m., did you execute a traffic stop of a red Ford Explorer?
Yes, I did.
And did you approach the passenger side?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe just very briefly the initial interaction that you had with the passenger of that vehicle?
I approached the vehicle on the passenger side. The passenger window was down. I started giving the individual that was in the passenger seat commands several times. The passenger was unresponsive and non-compliant to my commands. I then had to physically reach in because I wanted to see his hands because I couldn't see his hands. I reached in finally and grabbed his hand to put it up on the dash, and then that individual was taken from the vehicle and handcuffed.
Okay. Did you make any observations as to the passenger's behavior?
Could you repeat that question, sir? I'm sorry.
Did you make any additional observations as to the passenger's behavior?
Yeah, in my mind, his behavior was very nervous, anxious.
I will withdraw that question. In terms of, did you see the passenger do anything physically with his hands?
Yes, he turned away from me towards the driver's seat as continually as I was giving him commands to see his hands.
Did you draw your service weapon?
Yes, I did.
Did you observe the passenger put anything in his mouth?
Can you say that one more time, sir? I'm sorry.
Did you observe the passenger put anything in his mouth?
No, I didn't.
Did you, were you wearing a body-worn camera issued by the city of Minneapolis on that day?
Yes, I was.
And have you had an opportunity to review your body-worn camera prior to today's testimony?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, based upon the order, I would move to admit and publish Exhibit 1051.
All right. 1051 is received, subject to the motion in limine.
If we may publish.
Can you undo your seatbelt, sir? Sir, passenger, can you undo your seatbelt? Go ahead and undo your seatbelt. I don't plan on shooting you. I'm just saying, just take your time. Okay, relax. Just undo your seatbelt. Let her take care of her guy. Just keep your hands out where I can see him. Hey! Let me... Keep your hands where I can fucking see him! Okay? Put him up on the dash. Put him on the dash. I'm not gonna shoot you. Put your hands on the dash. Put your hands on the dash. The last time I'm gonna tell you that. It's simple. He keeps moving his hands around. He won't listen to what I have to say.
Put your hands on
Okay.
top of your head.
Put him on your head.
Top of your head. Okay, man. Open your mouth. Spit out what you got. Spit out what you got. I'm gonna tase you. Spit it out. He's eating all
Don't you jerk away from me.
Put your hands behind your back. That was one yellow pill, boss.
Okay, now slowly come on out.
Hand on
Now
your
put
head.
your
Hand on your head.
Okay, relax then. You're not going to get beat up or nothing. If you just follow what we're asking you to do.
I apologize to him, man. I apologize, man. I apologize.
Yeah.
Your Honor, may we have a sidebar?
Did you subsequently identify the driver of the passenger?
Yes, I did.
And who was that?
Mr. Floyd.
Your Honor, based on the court's ruling, I have no further questions for this witness.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor. Good morning, Officer Creighton.
Good morning.
You testified that you were the officer who approached the passenger side of the vehicle. You approached George Floyd on May 6th of 2019, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you had your gun drawn when you approached Mr. Floyd, isn't that right?
Yes, I pulled it, yes.
And when you approached Mr. Floyd, he said, "Don't shoot me, man, I don't want to get shot," right?
Something like that, yes.
You told him to undo his seatbelt, correct?
That's correct, yes, ma'am.
And he did that, right?
Yes, he did.
And then you said, "Put your hands where I can see them," correct?
Yes.
And then he put his hands in the air.
Yes,
And then you told him to put his hands on the dash, is that right?
that's correct.
And that was when you grabbed his hand and forcibly put it on the dashboard of the vehicle, correct?
Oh, and yes.
And then the other officer with you on the other side of the vehicle changed that to put your hands on your head, correct?
That's correct.
And then he put his hands on his head, right?
That's correct, yes.
And there was one officer who said that they were going to tase him, right?
That's what I heard, yes.
And you were yelling pretty loud, correct?
Yes, I was, yes. It escalated real quick.
Some profanity as well, correct?
Yes,
And you had your gun drawn the whole time you were giving commands, right?
once I started ordering him and he refused to show me his hands, yes, eventually it escalated where I pulled my gun, yes, ma'am.
And he was awake, correct?
What's that, ma'am?
Mr. Floyd was awake. Was he awake during this incident?
Yes,
He was conscious?
yes,
He didn't appear to be in medical distress to you when you were pulling him out of the car, is that right? He was talking to you, he was standing up, is that right?
I don't know if it was specifically, sometimes he was talking, sometimes he was mumbling. He was incoherent in my mind a lot of the time during there.
But you got him out of the car and you handcuffed him, right?
That's correct, ma'am.
And he stood next to the car, right?
Yes, ma'am.
He asked you not to beat him up, correct?
That's correct, yes.
He was able to walk, right?
Yes, he was.
He continued to talk to you.
Yes,
Technology is not our friend today. Ms. Aldridge, if you would.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Creighton, you were describing that you got Mr. Floyd out of the car, correct?
yes.
And he stood next to the car and you handcuffed him, correct?
Me and another officer had to physically handcuff him, yes.
And he didn't fall down, correct?
No, he didn't fall down.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any further?
Officer Creighton, there was another officer on the driver's side dealing with the driver,
Yes, that's correct, actually two.
and that officer was speaking to or giving commands to the driver
That's correct.
simultaneous to the time that you were giving commands to Mr. Floyd.
That's correct.
Did you hear the officer say, "Spit it out"?
I may have, yes. You'd have to see the video, and if that's what the video shows, then that's what occurred.
Okay. I have no further questions.
All right, anything further?
Briefly, Your Honor. Officer Creighton, you were just asked some questions about what the other officers were doing. You were interacting with Mr. Floyd, correct?
Yes,
And while you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
wait a minute. What was the question? Can you speak up a little louder, ma'am?
While you were interacting with Mr. Floyd, he didn't collapse on the ground, correct?
No, he did not.
Well, the answer is stricken. The objection is sustained.
You were asked some questions about what the other officers were doing, correct?
That's correct.
Your attention was focused on Mr. Floyd, correct?
Yes, it was.
And Mr. Floyd didn't drop dead while you were interacting with him, correct?
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further? No, Your Honor. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Michelle Moseng.
You can just stand right there for a second. Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth? Have a seat. And before you begin, if you could state your full name, spell each of your names, and then hold off, Mr. Nelson. Just give your full name and spell each name.
First name is Michelle, Michelle. Last name is Mosing, Moseng.
And if you're comfortable taking off the mask, I'd pretty much leave it up to you, but if that would make it easier to hear you, that would be appreciated. Members of the jury, this again is regarding an incident or an occurrence involving George Floyd on May 6, 2019. As I told you before, this evidence is being admitted solely for the limited purpose of showing what effects the ingestion of opioids may or may not have had on the physical well-being of George Floyd. This evidence is not to be used as evidence of the character of George Floyd. Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Thank you. Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
By whom are you currently employed?
I am retired.
Okay. Prior to your retirement, where were you employed?
I was a paramedic at Hennepin County Medical Center EMS.
How long were you a paramedic for Hennepin County?
Just under 34 years.
Okay. And can you describe the education that you had to become a paramedic?
I have a 2-year degree in emergency medical care and rescue from Mankato State, and then actually got an additional registered nursing. I graduated from St. Mary's University in '91.
Okay. And so you worked as a paramedic for Hennepin County for the entirety of your career, or did you have other employment?
I actually worked for a year in Dakota County for 1 year, and then I have worked at Hennepin, or had worked at Hennepin ever since.
Fair to say you've gone to a large number of calls during the course of your career.
Yes.
All right. And you may not remember every specific detail about every call, correct?
No.
And as a paramedic, do you maintain records about each call that you go to in order to assess the patient's care?
Yes, we do a run sheet or a patient medical record that we hand off
Okay.
at the emergency room.
Now,
If you can just speak up just a little bit.
Sorry.
prior to your testimony today, have you had an opportunity to review a run sheet from May 6th of 2019 involving George Perry Floyd?
Yes.
Do you recall all of those details off the top of your head now?
No.
All right. Now, in terms of your recollection of May 6th of 2019, were you summoned to the Minneapolis Police Department
Yes, precinct 4.
to attend to Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Upon arriving at the 4th precinct, did you talk to Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Did you learn information from Mr. Floyd about what he had consumed and the time frame he had consumed it in?
Yeah, it was quite hard to assess him. He was upset and confused. Some of the things he said were...
I'm going to strike the answers non-responsive. If you could
Perhaps lead.
Certainly. Did Mr. Floyd, were you able to learn that Mr. Floyd had consumed some narcotics that day?
Yes.
What did he tell you specifically about what narcotics he had taken and when he had taken them?
He told me that he had been taking multiple, like every 20 minutes. And it was a, I don't remember if it was Oxy or Percocet, but it was a opioid based. It wasn't real consistent with his behavior. At that point, was real elevated and agitated.
No, I'm gonna,
The last statement about agitation is stricken as non-responsive. You can just wait for the next question.
thank you.
Thank you.
But he had informed you he had taken some sort of an opioid every 20 minutes or something like that, correct?
And then another one as the officer came up.
Okay, so he told you that he had taken a pill at the time the officers were apprehending him.
Correct.
Did you do a physical assessment of Mr. Floyd at that time?
Yes.
Specifically, did you take his blood pressure?
Yes, I took a set of vitals.
Would you agree that your first vitals were taken at approximately 1:34 and 59 seconds?
Without looking at the run sheet, I wouldn't know for sure.
Would it refresh your recollection to review the run sheet?
Yes.
May I approach the witness room?
Thank you. I've written on here that, yeah, it was 1334 was the first recorded vital signs.
That refreshes your recollection?
Yes. Did you need it back?
I'll leave it with you for the moment.
I'd like to testify from memory.
If you need to refresh your memory with that, just let us know and we'll allow you to refresh your memory. But otherwise, testify to your memory as best you can.
Okay.
Thank you.
At approximately 13:34, that's 1:34 p.m., agreed? You took his vitals, correct?
Correct.
And that would include his blood pressure at the time?
Yes.
And did you record what his blood pressure was at that time?
Yes, it was 216 over 160.
Did you ultimately make recommendations to transport Mr. Floyd to the hospital?
Based on that and other issues.
Okay. And ultimately, was he brought to the hospital?
Eventually.
All right. I believe that's all I have, Your Honor.
Ms. Eldridge.
Good morning, Ms. Moseng.
Good morning.
You provided treatment to George Floyd on May 6, 2019, correct?
Correct.
Is that
Yes.
right? And you were concerned about his blood pressure at that time, correct?
That was one of the things.
And in the course of your treatment of him, he explained that his high blood pressure wasn't something new, right?
Initially, he denied medical issues, but then when I discovered his blood pressure, I specifically asked again, and he said yes, he had history of hypertension and had not been taking his medication.
And he said he hadn't been taking his blood pressure medication for months, correct?
Correct.
And he told you that he swallowed some pills, right?
Yes.
Approximately 7 Percocet, correct?
I documented, 7 to 9 every 20 minutes or so for a while.
And Percocet is a brand name, right?
Yes.
Is that oxycodone and acetaminophen?
Yes.
And it's used to treat pain, correct?
Correct.
You testified that it's an opioid, yes?
Correct.
So he told you that he had been taking those pills throughout the day, right?
Yes, and I asked him why. He said he's because he was addicted.
He told you he was addicted and he responded to your questions about taking the pills, correct?
Correct.
And he was able to walk, correct?
Yes.
He was able to stand up.
Correct.
And you wanted him to go to the hospital, right?
Correct.
And he didn't feel like he wanted to go to the hospital, correct? He was resistant to going to the hospital, right?
I know he was real resistant to get on our bed. It was hard to tell exactly what he was upset about.
I'm going to object at this point, Your
I'm
Honor.
sorry.
Just with respect to going to the hospital, Your Honor.
Yes,
I'm going to limit your question, the question I asked to that. He didn't want to go to the hospital, right?
I'll say yes.
It took some time to convince him to go to the hospital,
Yes.
correct? And you indicated that he told you he had been addicted to opioids, correct?
Correct.
And he had been addicted to opioids at that point for a year and a half, right?
I am not aware of that.
But he didn't feel like he needed to go to the hospital.
He didn't want to go with us at that point.
And you were referred to your run report, right? The record that you keep in terms of the treatment of patients. You see that up there, correct?
Yes.
And according to your run report, you documented that Mr. Floyd was alert, correct?
Yes.
And
Here's
that
the-
he obeyed commands, correct?
Eventually.
That's what's in your report, right? Correct?
Correct.
And that he had an appropriate response to stimulation,
Correct.
yes?
Correct.
He wasn't nauseous or vomiting when you were treating him, right?
No.
His respiratory rate was normal, yes?
It was elevated at times.
You wrote respiratory effort normal in your report, correct?
At the beginning, yes. His effort was normal. It was increased at times.
And throughout your documentation, you wrote respiratory effort normal, correct?
Correct.
At 1334, at 1409, at 1426. All those notes, you indicated that his respiratory effort was normal, correct?
Correct.
He was not in respiratory distress, correct?
No.
His blood oxygen level was normal, right?
Correct.
His pulse was normal, correct?
Yes.
His heart rhythm was regular or normal, right?
Correct.
His EKG was normal.
Correct.
He had a normal rhythm, the sinus rhythm, which is the rhythm of a normal, healthy heart, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated that you had been worried about high blood pressure for the possibility of a stroke, right?
Among other things, yes.
But he didn't have a stroke, right?
Didn't have any indications that we were picking up at the time.
He didn't have a stroke while you were with him.
No.
He was never given Narcan, correct?
Correct.
He didn't stop breathing.
No.
His heart didn't stop.
No.
He didn't go into cardiac arrest.
No.
He didn't go into a coma.
No.
And you took him to the hospital, correct?
Correct.
And he was monitored for 2 hours and released right after, right?
I don't know.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything further? Thank you. You may step down. Sure. Members of the jury, we're going to take a lawyerly 5-minute break, which means it'll probably be 10. But let's go with 5 minutes for now. Thank you.